In the dark bedroom, the intense cries of the baby echoed.
What's wrong, Susan? Are you hungry? Karen, did you wake up too?
Just when one falls asleep, the other wakes up. When both are awake, they both demand to be held. Since giving birth to the twins, there hasn't been a moment to sleep, and both William and I have been growing more and more exhausted. One morning, the sound of the intercom prompted me to open the front door with sunken eyes. There stood two unexpected visitors.
Looking gloomy so early in the morning. You're making us feel miserable too. We're here because you haven't brought the grandchildren over.
Standing there bathed in the morning sunlight were my mother-in-law, Mary, and sister-in-law, Elizabeth, both looking displeased. I am Linda. I'm a petite 36-year-old, not even 5 feet tall. My husband William is 2 years younger and works as a businessman. My in-laws run a well-known local company. William is a giant at almost 6 feet, and both his parents and Elizabeth are over 5 feet 7 inches. So when I visit the in-laws' home, I feel like a dwarf. The kitchen is also designed for Mary, who is 5 feet 8 inches, so I can't help much. Mary and Elizabeth don't like me running around without really accomplishing anything. They always dismiss me with cold words like, "You're in the way, just sit down." I want to get along with William's family, but I feel ashamed and frustrated for being useless. Even so, as long as I can endure the visits during holidays, the in-laws don't actively interfere with us. William is gentle and kind, making our married life peaceful. But everything changed when I got pregnant with twins. Twin pregnancies are said to put a great strain on the mother's body. On top of that, I was considered an older mother, petite, and with existing health issues, making it very risky, and the obstetrician was concerned.
They might not survive. The mother's life could be in danger. You and your husband need to discuss this carefully.
Hearing such despairing words, we couldn't even savor the joy of having children, and William and I felt like we were in mourning. My parents were surprisingly positive, saying,
"Twins are amazing."
But my in-laws and Elizabeth were strongly opposed.
"There's no way you can have twins with your health. Just give up this time,"
they shouted, and I held back my tears as I went home. William, too, was swayed by the doctor's words about my life being at risk and was on the verge of giving up on the pregnancy. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't imagine abandoning the children who came to us just to save myself. Prepared to be hated for life, I defied my in-laws and persuaded William to continue with the twin pregnancy. As expected, my body couldn't handle the strain, and at 5 months, I was hospitalized until delivery. During my stay, neither my parents nor in-laws visited, only William came every weekend. He brought snacks and books I liked and chatted about trivial things. Though the hospital stay was tough and anxiety-inducing, I managed because he was on my side. And then, as soon as I reached full term, I had a cesarean section. 2 tiny but healthy baby girls were born. Holding those small bodies with William, tears of happiness and relief flowed. But childbirth wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The horror of raising twins began here. Born a bit earlier than the due date, Susan and Karen slept well for the first 2 weeks. But after that, they cried incessantly, be it early morning or the middle of the night. While I nursed one, the other would cry, and while changing one's diaper, the other would have an explosive diaper. The hectic pace and the tension of having small lives in my hands drove me into a nervous breakdown. William was supportive, but he could only help during weekends or nights as his company didn't have paternity leave. After exhausting workdays, he would soothe the twins, developing dark circles under his eyes. I couldn't bring myself to ask for more help. I couldn't rely on my parents either. When we found out at 7 months that the twins were girls, my parents openly grimaced and said,
How could you, a first wife, have 2 girls? You owe it to the in-laws to produce a boy. Get them out and try for a son.
Such heartless words left me in shock. I never imagined that my parents, who were happy about the twin pregnancy, would turn on me. Especially because of their gender. Staring blankly in disbelief, my mother, Patricia, gently scolded me.
You know, when I had you, your mother-in-law gave me a hard time too.
Grandma? My paternal grandmother passed away when I was 1, so I have no memory of her. Did my mother endure such criticism to have me? Then why did you have me?
Well, we planned to have a second child soon after. Though it didn't happen, and your mother-in-law passed away quickly, so it wasn't an issue.
I see.
Don't misunderstand. I'm advising you out of concern. Your mother-in-law seems long-lived. If you want her favor, get pregnant again soon. They will never accept twin girls.
My parents' seemingly absurd confession turned out to be their true feelings. Since they deemed the twin girls insignificant, they visited briefly the day after their birth and hadn't contacted me since. There was no way I could ask my parents for help, saying, "Raising twins is tough, please help me." And as Patricia said, if the in-laws hated my twin daughters, I couldn't rely on them either. They had opposed the twin pregnancy from the start. Since discovering the twins were girls, William was the only person I could trust. With nowhere to turn and sleepless nights continuing, both William and I grew more and more worn out. One morning, right after William left for work, the intercom rang. Thinking William had forgotten something, I opened the door, only to find 2 unexpected visitors.
Looking gloomy so early in the morning. You're making us feel miserable too. Mother? Elizabeth?
Standing there in the sparkling morning sunlight, with frowns on their faces, were my mother-in-law Mary and sister-in-law Elizabeth. Before I could say anything in surprise, they pushed past me into the house.
What's going on?
What do you think?
We're here because you haven't brought the grandchildren over. Wait, what?
Mary's strong tone made the blood drain from my face. I'm sorry. I was so busy with the kids, I didn't have time.
Yes. Exactly. What?
Elizabeth's loud voice made me yelp. Mary looked around the room and kitchen, sighing.
The room's a mess, and the fridge is empty.
I'm sorry.
Why are you apologizing?
Sorry. Seeing me in a panic, Elizabeth sighed.
Where are the babies?
Before I could answer, the newborn's cries echoed from the bedroom. Elizabeth gently picked up the twins, then tossed me into the bedroom, saying,
Useless wife, just stay in there.
And shut the door. I sat there in the empty bedroom, speechless.
What should I do? What should I do?
Too tired to think straight, I couldn't decide whether to get the babies back or stay put. As my mind spun, the babies' cries stopped, and the room fell silent. In the rare quiet and empty space, I fell asleep as if I had fainted. I woke up to the light streaming through the west-facing window. Looking around the bedroom with a foggy mind, I noticed the empty cribs and my heart jumped. Rushing to open the door, I found Elizabeth feeding the twins and Mary chopping vegetables in the kitchen. Mary looked at me with a dissatisfied expression. You slept well. I'm sorry. Why are you apologizing? That's a good thing.
Huh?
Wash your face and sit down. I made some food.
Okay.
Following Mary's orders, I quickly got ready and sat at the dining table. Mary promptly served steaming beef stew, miso soup, white rice, and side dishes. Some of the ingredients were things that hadn't been in our fridge. Drawn in, I took a bite of potato. The warm, nostalgic taste spread through my body. Delicious. Good. Mary's brusque words were accompanied by a faintly pleased look. Elizabeth watched the twins with a gentle expression.
I gave them the milk that was there. Thank you. Breastfeeding is good, but getting them used to formula is handy. This way, you can let others help. Right.
Elizabeth glared at my vague response.
So, when things are tough, you need to rely on us. Understand? Sorry. Stop apologizing.
As I shrank back, feeling guilty, Elizabeth sighed.
Sorry. It's our harsh words that are the problem.
What? Elizabeth scratched her head, and Mary frowned. At that moment, William came home. He was surprised to see Mary and Elizabeth, but quickly realized things weren't bad and relaxed.
Linda, sorry for surprising you. Mom and Elizabeth were so worried we might collapse, they couldn't stand it anymore. What?
I was wide-eyed at William's revelation. Mary and Elizabeth averted their eyes awkwardly. It seemed they had been worried about me since I got pregnant with the twins. They opposed the pregnancy out of concern for my life. They were terrified at the idea of tiny me giving birth to twins. They hadn't visited me in the hospital to avoid raising my blood pressure with their stress. They knew their words could be harsh and intimidating. But the snacks and items William brought to cheer me on were chosen with great care by Mary and Elizabeth. In hindsight, there were many stylish snacks that he wouldn't have picked. During my pregnancy, they frequently visited a famous shrine for safe deliveries. When the twins were safely born, they were overjoyed, but felt too guilty to visit right away. Still, hearing the exhaustion in William's voice during his updates, they sensed our crisis and rushed over. Mary and Elizabeth were just clumsy but kind-hearted people. Unbeknownst to me, they had been loving and protecting me all along. I was too overwhelmed during the pregnancy to notice.
Will you really accept these children? Even though I couldn't give you a son. A son? Boy or girl, as long as they're healthy, it's fine. I'm a woman, and so are you.
Elizabeth dismissed the anxiety I'd carried alone with a single sentence.
More importantly, Linda, I need to ask you something. Mom hasn't held the babies yet.
What?
Wait, Elizabeth. She thinks she doesn't deserve to hold them because she told you to give up on their lives.
Mom. William looked at Mary with sadness. Mary frowned and looked down. Seeing her like that made my eyes well up. Mary regretted it much more deeply than I had realized. She regretted telling me to give up on the twins. She had only said it to protect my life. I stood up and took a baby from Elizabeth.
Please, Mary, hold her. But, please.
As I bowed my head, Mary reached out hesitantly. Her large hands trembled as they cradled the tiny body.
So warm.
Yes.
Alive.
Yes. I'm sorry, so sorry. Mary held the baby's tiny hand. Thank you for being born. Mary's trembling voice brought tears to my eyes. I regretted it. I regretted assuming they had rejected us and distancing myself. It almost led to losing so much. I realized that for my sake, my children's sake, and the sake of the kind people who cared about me, it was important to rely on others. After that, I gradually began to rely on my in-laws. When my father-in-law James held the daughters for the first time, he cried while apologizing. Everyone was genuinely concerned about my health. There was no one here who blamed me for having daughters. Elizabeth, who already had 2 boys, became a great mentor and advisor. My parents-in-law were doting on the girls, spoiling them with gifts. Despite their sharp tongues, Mary and Elizabeth were just tough women working in male-dominated fields. Seeing their cold demeanor and scolding as endearing quirks, I even found them lovable. They would still shoo me out of the kitchen at the in-laws' home, but I realized it was out of concern for my safety.
You're cute like a little mouse, but we're afraid we might step on them.
When they said that, I felt a mix of emotions. When the twins were 6 months old. Raising twins was still challenging, but thanks to my in-laws' help, I started to feel a bit more relaxed and decided to celebrate the twins' half-birthday. Of course, I invited my in-laws, but Mary kindly suggested, "Why don't you invite your parents too?" So I decided to invite my parents as well. Though hesitant to see my parents, I didn't want to waste my in-laws' kindness and still hoped to trust my parents. I thought maybe I had misinterpreted my parents' harsh words. But I was wrong. On the day of the celebration, Mary and Elizabeth catered the meal and gifted matching outfits for the girls. James was enchanted, holding the girls alternately. But my parents arrived empty-handed, devoured the food, and showed no interest in holding the babies. Near the end of the party, my dad Michael dropped a bombshell.
"So, when are you planning the next pregnancy?" "What?"
The room froze. Confused, I desperately tried to smooth things over.
"Dad, you see, we're still overwhelmed with the girls. Besides, getting pregnant within a year of giving birth is really hard on the body."
But it's not impossible, right? You'll be 40 soon if you keep dawdling.
You need to have a boy quickly for William and fulfill your duty as a wife.
William frowned at Michael's comment.
"I'm fine with either boys or girls."
"Oh, come on. You run a company, you can't mean that." Despite William's serious denial, Michael laughed crudely, thinking he was being modest.
"Right?"
My mother Patricia nodded in agreement. "Oh, I knew it. My parents really do look down on me for not having a boy." William supported my shoulders as I stood there, pale and frozen.
"Father-in-law, Linda endured a difficult pregnancy and risked her life to give us these precious daughters. Neither I nor my parents could ask for more."
William. Tears welled up as I looked at William's determined profile. But my parents smirked eerily at William.
"William, a man needs to be more ambitious. Your sister might take over everything." "What?"
"She has 2 sons, doesn't she?
If you want to inherit the company and the estate, you need to think about the future."
Not only William and I, but also my in-laws and Elizabeth, turned pale. Finally, I understood. My parents' obsession with having a boy wasn't about protecting me from mistreatment at the in-laws' home. They wanted William to inherit the in-laws' company. And the children I bore. My parents wanted their grandchildren to inherit that. They were likely hoping to benefit from me being the CEO's wife and their grandchild becoming the heir. Maybe they had even supported my marriage to William because his family were business owners. I felt my hands growing colder from the shock. Michael's outrageous suggestion left everyone speechless, and he went further.
"If the twins are a burden, there's a guy who'd be perfect. One of my subordinates is looking to adopt because his wife is infertile." "What?"
Mary and Elizabeth, who had been silent until now, glared at Michael.
"Give Susan and Karen up for adoption?"
Mary's voice came from the depths of the earth. "Yes."
"You wanted a boy, right? Sorry for our useless daughter. Once we get rid of the twins, we'll have her give birth to a healthy boy immediately." "We don't need that." "Right, you don't need what?" "We're fine, thank you."
Michael, who had been sure of their agreement, was stunned. He finally noticed the furious faces of my in-laws and Elizabeth and flinched.
"How dare you suggest abandoning the babies in front of them and their parents? You are despicable."
Mary spat out her words with undisguised disgust.
But, the eldest son not having a male heir is a problem for you." It's not a problem at all. As long as my son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren are healthy and happy, gender doesn't matter. But silence! Yikes!
The force of Mary's command made my parents shrink like frogs. James, standing at over 6 feet tall, looked down at my petite parents with cold eyes.
Today is a day to celebrate our grandchildren reaching 6 months, not a place for you to spout your desires. If you have no shame or decency, then leave. What? Linda!
My mom looked at me pleadingly. Did she really think I would support them in trying to give away my precious daughters? No way. Shaking with shock and anger, I fought to keep my voice steady.
Leave! We will never give up our daughters. Linda, we're just worried about your position. Get out! Now! Yikes!
Elizabeth raised the knife she had brought to cut the cake, her face filled with fury. My parents scrambled out of the house, practically crawling in fear. In the silence that followed, only Susan's cooing broke the tension.
I'm so sorry for my parents' rudeness,
I said, bowing to Mary and Elizabeth. There was so much I needed to say, but I couldn't find the words. Mary's large hand enveloped my cold one.
Linda, we are just grateful the girls were born healthy and that you are safe. We are so thankful that you brought 2 beautiful grandchildren into the world.
Mary.
If you want more children, of course we will support you, but we don't want you to risk your health. Take care of yourself for the sake of your daughters. Do you understand our feelings?
Yes. Tears welled up in my eyes at Mary's warm words and touch. I was still in shock and angry at my parents. But more than that, I was overjoyed by the support and love from these wonderful people.
Now that the troublemakers are gone, let's start over. Cake for the adults and strawberries for the children.
Elizabeth placed a large piece of cake in front of me. It was at least twice the size of William's slice. That's blatant favoritism.
Of course. Linda is doing an amazing job with her first-time parenting. And since I'm raising a difficult 3-year-old, I deserve this big piece too.
Hey, now. William chuckled as Elizabeth placed another big slice in front of herself. With the usual atmosphere restored, I felt a wave of relief. No matter what my parents said, I had people who would stand by me. I vowed to protect my daughters from my parents' harmful influence. As I watched Susan and Karen happily eat strawberries in William and James's arms, I made a silent promise. A week after my parents' outburst, we had a new incident. One peaceful afternoon. While spending time with William and the kids, the doorbell rang. On the monitor were unfamiliar faces. Suspicious, I opened the door, and the couple smiled as they explained their visit.
We heard from the supervisor that you were giving away your twin babies. What?
As William and I stared in shock, they froze as well. Hearing their story, I felt a sudden, intense anger. The supervisor they mentioned was my father, Michael. They were the couple Michael had mentioned, looking to adopt. Michael had moved forward with plans to give my children away without my consent. Struggling to contain my anger, I explained the situation calmly. The couple was appalled by his actions. Apparently, Michael had tearfully told them, "My daughter is too weak to raise twins. For her health, please take the babies."
In reality, he demanded I have a boy right after giving birth to twins. I spat.
The couple's faces turned cold. Thankfully, they were reasonable and, though disappointed, they offered me kind words and left. As soon as they were gone, I explained everything to William, who had been watching the kids in the living room. His face turned terrifyingly furious. Unforgivable. I couldn't believe these were my real parents. I wanted to storm into my parents' home and unleash my fury, but I held back. There were more important things to do. I confirmed something with William. A week after Michael's subordinate had visited, my parents barged in, shouting,
"Why did you turn my subordinate away?" "What do you mean, why?" "I told you we're not giving up the twins." "I was thinking of your position, and you treat your father like this?" "My position? Are you insane?"
Though I had thought many harsh words, I hadn't acted on them yet. But Michael, his face red with anger, started ranting. Apparently, the subordinate who had been misled by Michael exposed Michael's misdeeds to everyone. The people around were, of course, disappointed, especially those with children. They reported it to the company president, who adored his grandchildren so much he had their photos on his smartphone. The president was so furious his hair stood on end. He summoned Michael for a half-day lecture, and even that wasn't enough, he also made snide remarks during the morning assembly. In the small town and small company, Michael's wrongdoing quickly became known to all employees. The stories of his misdeeds spread to the families of employees and neighbors, who whispered that my parents were devils who sacrificed their granddaughters to get a grandson.
"I was worried about your situation if you didn't have a son, and this is how you repay me?" "You're still talking about that?" "Father-in-law and mother-in-law said they're fine without a boy." "You don't understand the world. To secure our family's future, we need a boy to take over after William."
Patricia bit her nails. If they really cared about their daughter, they would value life over money and social status. But explaining such rationality wouldn't resonate with these people blinded by greed. Instead, I told them the truth that would hit them the hardest.
"Well, I'll tell you that William is not going to inherit the in-laws company." "What?" "The successor of that company is Elizabeth." "What?"
My parents were shocked by my revelation.
"That can't be true. There's no way father-in-law would allow a woman to take over." "Whether he allows it or not, the company belongs to her." "What?"
At William's words, my parents practically collapsed in shock. Yes, the president of the in-laws company is Mary, not James. If they had checked the company's website, they would have seen Mary listed as the representative, but they never noticed because of their assumptions. Elizabeth has been studying to take over the company while working there. William works in a completely different industry. I confirmed with him that he had no interest in the in-laws business and wanted to continue his current career.
"So, I will never be the company president's wife, forever." "No! No!"
My parents' faces turned from blue to pale white. Patricia covered her face with her hands, lamenting.
"I boasted to all our relatives that you were going to be a company president's wife. What do we do now?"
"I don't care."
"Portia!"
"Portia?" Michael gasped.
"I thought you'd be wealthy, so we didn't save for retirement. I bought the Portia I've always dreamed of."
"And I just ordered a kitchen renovation." "These are my parents."
"You'll have to work hard and save up again." "No! No!"
As my parents trembled in despair, William gently grabbed their collars and escorted them out. Thus, my parents, at 56, were forced to start saving for their retirement all over again. Despite everything, the cruel actions Michael took against me and my daughters continued to haunt him, and unable to withstand the cold pressure from those around him, he fled from his job. He hadn't prepared for early retirement and had actually spent the savings he expected to inherit from me, and even had loans. My mom had been a housewife for the 36 years since I was born. Their current lifestyle was on the brink of collapse, making retirement out of the question. They looked for new jobs, but were not hired anywhere. They even called me in tears, begging me to ask my mother-in-law to hire them, but I cut them off with a single sentence: "We don't need outdated people who look down on women." I was sometimes depressed by how pathetic my parents had become, but William and my in-laws cheered me up by buying my favorite sweets and foods. My new family, who accepted me, was so warm and kind. The twins grew steadily, spreading their adorable smiles. Every time I felt proud of myself for protecting these lives, my heart grew stronger. Even with parents like that, I knew I would be okay in this warm, soft place. I was certain of it. 6 months later.
Dad did.
Did you hear that? Susan just called me Daddy, right?
No, she said Grandpa.
Isn't that right, Susan? All right, Susan must be hungry. Look, Mommy made delicious food for you.
Why?
Did she just say Granny?
All right.
My in-laws and William were excited, while Elizabeth, who was seriously decorating, responded with a nonchalant nod. Those once intimidating in-laws now showed nothing but sweetness towards their grandchildren. Today was the twins' first birthday. With Elizabeth's family also here, it was very lively. I made a yogurt cake that even the babies could eat, using recipes I had gathered online. I spread strained yogurt on pancakes, decorated them with finger biscuits, strawberries, and a one candle.
You're lucky to have such a beautiful cake made for you,
Elizabeth said, poking Karen's cheek, making her laugh. Susan was reaching out from William's arms, eager to grab the cake. I felt deeply moved and happy to be part of this incredibly joyful scene. I might want another baby in the future, and it might be a boy. But I knew that William and my in-laws would love my children wholeheartedly, regardless of gender. Meeting a family I could believe in made me confident that my life would continue to be wonderful.
Stay here. All right?
I felt like I was seeing the terrifying face of my beloved Sherwood for the first time. As I let go of his hand in fear, the door above my head closed. An unpleasant sound clanked. It was locked. Trapped in the dark basement, I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Because right now, I'm holding a baby. The adorable little being born just yesterday, Terrence. Why so suddenly? Tears well up. To be locked in a dark basement, with this body that was just born. Terrence, whom I had just nursed, is sleeping, unaware of anything. That was the only consolation. It must have been about 3 hours. When I turned on the only lamp and finished nursing again, a dark shadow appeared in the light of that lamp.
Who's there?
I turn around, trembling with fear. The dark shadow that suddenly appeared from the back of the basement. It was the bluebird of happiness that gave me the chance to lift me out of the depths of misery. My name is Blondie, 27 years old. I work as a veterinary nurse at an animal hospital in town. Recently married, I was living happy days. My husband's name is Sherwood. He is 2 years older than me. He is a serious and gentle person. He's so kind that he thinks of others and acts accordingly. I even had a sense of respect for him. It's like a dream that I got to date Sherwood, got proposed to, and even made it to marriage. But somewhere in my heart, there was always a dark feeling taking root. The reason is none other than my unfortunate childhood. My parents, Sean and Alana, are small-town doctors. They raised my older brother Calvin and me to become doctors. They had always been obsessed with the status of being a doctor and wouldn't allow any other path. When I was in elementary school, my artwork depicting a groomer for the theme of future dreams was torn up as soon as I brought it home.
I can't believe you draw anything other than a doctor. A groomer. You've got to be kidding me.
My mother, Alana, cursed my dream and threw it away like trash. Behind me, crying, my father Sean was sneering.
I knew girls were no good.
Becoming a doctor is impossible for Blondie. Well, we have Calvin. I'm counting on you, Calvin. Yeah. My clever brother never defied our parents. We were raised as the favored brother and the oppressed sister since long ago. The fact that our distorted family somehow managed to maintain balance was undoubtedly thanks to my brother's hard work. He was always on my side. Blondie, pursue the path you love. Leave Sean and Alana to me. But then, you'll. It's okay. I don't mind becoming a doctor that much. Blondie, your dream now is to become a veterinary nurse, right? Yeah. Becoming a vet seems difficult. He never laughed at my dream, even though I wasn't as good at studying as he was. My kind brother was my sole emotional support and a breakwater against our parents. I loved my brother dearly. But that summer of his sophomore year in high school, he died in a traffic accident. It was an unbelievably painful, heart-wrenching farewell. And with the balance of the family he had been protecting now shattered, our parents started treating me even more like a nuisance. What on earth, such a useless daughter remains in this house? Oh, how unfortunate we are.
Why did it have to be Calvin? If only you had disappeared instead.
The moment I heard those words, I heard the sound of my life crumbling at my feet. No, it had been a parent-child relationship built on sand, already on the verge of collapse. Still, I gritted my teeth and made it through middle and high school. And after graduating high school, I chose to attend a university where I could study veterinary nursing. Of course, my parents, who wanted me to go to medical school, were furious.
You ungrateful brat! Don't ever set foot in this house again.
I was disowned and driven out of the house. Fortunately, as an honors student, I was exempt from tuition fees, so I didn't have to give up on going to college. I paid for my living expenses with part-time jobs while pursuing the path I loved. It was busy but fulfilling days. Little by little, a sense of self-affirmation started welling up from within. My life was just beginning from here. During that time, at a part-time job introduced by my seminar professor, I met my now husband, Sherwood. We fell in love, started dating, and decided to get married. That's when I contacted my parents for the first time since being disowned. I thought I should at least inform them if I was getting married, but that was a mistake.
Marriage? The other person is a doctor, of course, right?
No, he's just a regular company employee. But you know, he's
a company employee. Didn't I say I won't accept anyone other than a doctor? You're really hopeless, Blondie. Don't contact me about such things anymore.
Sean interrupted my words and berated me. And then, Alana, who took over, also let out an exasperated voice.
You really keep disappointing us. How disheartening.
The two of them wouldn't listen to me at all. Contacting them after so long only made me feel more miserable. With such experiences, our wedding turned out to be a small one. Actually, Sherwood's father, Eleanor, is the president of a large corporation, and Sherwood also works at a subsidiary as the next president. Originally, they would have wanted to hold a grand wedding with many guests. But they prioritized my circumstances. A small wedding held in Hawaii. Welcomed into a warm family, I secretly cried while hiding my face with a veil. That was the first time I learned that tears can flow even when you're happy. 2 years into our marriage, our peaceful life continued. Around the time we were thinking of getting a new house, I finally became pregnant. When it was revealed to be a boy at the checkup, I was filled with a different kind of happiness than ever before. But at the same time,
should I tell my parents about the pregnancy?
I had another problem to worry about regarding my parents. It will be their only grandchild. But, well, let's cherish Blondie's feelings. It may sound strange, but even after all they did, I still had a feeling of wanting to rely on my parents. If it's a grandchild, maybe they'll be happy too. With such faint hopes, I made the call after 2 years. Hello, Alana? It's me, Blondie. You know, I couldn't quite understand their reaction when I reported the pregnancy. But as soon as I told them it was a boy, it must be Calvin's reincarnation. Alana's tone changed, and Sean, who excitedly took over the phone, spoke in a bright voice for the first time in a while.
Well done, Blondie. A boy, how joyous.
Yeah. For some reason, even though they were happy, a chilling sensation enveloped me. I had a bad feeling. And then, Sean's next words shocked me like never before. When that child is born, hand him over to us. We'll raise him to be a fine doctor.
What?
At first, I didn't understand what he was saying. But as my parents on the other end of the receiver clamored about Calvin's reincarnation and successor, even I turned pale at the thought that this was definitely abnormal. I had a vague feeling, but as I thought, my parents are crazy. Overwhelmed by a feeling akin to horror, I couldn't bear it and hung up the phone in the middle of the conversation. Then, the answering machine kept receiving calls and messages over and over again. Moreover, they even barged into our apartment and demanded, "Hand over our grandchild." Even Sherwood and I couldn't take it anymore and decided to consult his parents. I felt bad about worrying my in-laws, but the grandchild was also precious to them. After hearing the story, they thought about it with care. Right now is a crucial time for Blondie. It might be better for her to stay somewhere else. As a result of the discussion, it was decided that we would be isolated in a villa area as per Eleanor's suggestion. Sherwood arranged with the company to work remotely, and my mother-in-law, Kitty, would take care of household chores and my personal needs. I was deeply grateful to my in-laws for making all the perfect arrangements. Really, for everything. I'm sorry, Kitty. Don't apologize, Blondie. You haven't done anything wrong. Kitty is a very kind person who has been worried about my parent-child relationship since the beginning of our marriage. She is such a warm-hearted person that I think Sherwood is kind because he was raised by this Kitty. I like her. Living in isolation, I thought about giving birth. And to avoid being found by my parents, I decided to have a home birth at this villa. When Sherwood heard about my decision, he was surprised but accepted it. I thought you were a strong-willed person, Blondie, but I didn't expect this much. I understand. I'll cooperate too. I didn't know he thought of me that way, and I felt a little embarrassed. Kitty, who heard the story, also nodded seriously.
I understand. I have a friend who is a midwife nearby. I'll ask if she can come.
Thank you very much. The midwife introduced to me was a stout woman named Evelyn. She firmly assured me that she would fully cooperate with this special delivery. I live nearby, so I can rush over any time. Leave it to me. Evelyn puffed out her chest reassuringly with a thump. I couldn't be grateful enough. What made me even happier was that when we moved to this villa, Sherwood brought a dog with him. Sherwood made my dream of having a toy poodle come true on this occasion. I thought it might be a good distraction. And it can be a playmate for the child in the future.
Thank you. It's so adorable.
The black toy poodle was friendly and quickly grew attached to us. I named it TYL. The fairy tale I read long ago, The Bluebird. I loved the mysterious adventure group searching for happiness, so I borrowed a name from one of the characters. The bluebird that brings happiness. I wish it would appear for me someday. And so, in the unpopular villa, I started preparing for childbirth. To ensure a safe delivery, I made sure to eat well and exercise moderately. The checkups went smoothly, and without any major issues, the baby in my belly grew day by day. The natural environment and stress-free life must be good, Evelyn said. Coordination with the hospital in case of emergency was also prepared, with Evelyn at the center. And finally, labor began. The pain and suffering were so intense that I felt like I was going to faint. Around dawn, I safely gave birth to a baby boy. Evelyn brought the newborn baby close to my chest and showed me his face. My very cute baby. Warm and fresh. It was smooth for a first birth. An easy delivery, above all. Evelyn smiled happily. Sherwood, who was present, cried his heart out, and Kitty, who had been waiting, shed tears and comforted me. The baby's name had been decided in advance through discussions with Sherwood. We named him Terrence.
Everyone, thank you so much.
No matter how much I expressed my gratitude, it wouldn't be enough. As Terrence slept beside me, I felt a happiness I had never experienced before and fell into a deep sleep. But it happened in the middle of the night. Still sleeping lightly after giving birth, I was awakened by the sound of someone rushing over. Sherwood and Kitty, who had been in another room, came in with panicked expressions.
This is bad, Blondie. It seems your parents found out where we are. What? How? I don't know. But they'll definitely be here soon too. You need to hide for now.
Sherwood and Kitty pull me out, still unable to move my body as I want. They took me, holding a squirming Terrence, to the basement connected to the hallway. This is a soundproof room for playing musical instruments. Sorry it's dark since the light bulb isn't on right now, but wait here. The room is about 12.8 square meters in size. It must have been hastily prepared. A makeshift bed, a light bulb lamp, water, and food are placed inside. Then, Kitty, who had gone to check the situation outside, returned.
This is bad. They're almost here.
Indeed, the sound of a car stopping could be heard from outside. My parents had arrived. No. They'll take him away. My child. It's all right. That happened. Sherwood hugs me as I panic, and then I'm lowered into the basement.
Stay here. You hear me.
Sherwood has an unusually stern look on his face. Startled by his expression, which also looks frightening, I let go of his hand, and the door is shut and locked. Why so suddenly, like this? I never thought I'd have to hide in a basement like this right after giving birth. I was about to cry, but Terrence let out a small cry in my arms, so I hurriedly soothed him. That's right, I have to pull myself together for his sake too. Suppressing my agitated feelings, I focused on calming Terrence down. And after about 3 hours, I suppose. Having finished nursing Terrence, I was staring at the door above that still wouldn't open. There, in the light from the lamp, a dark shadow suddenly appeared.
Who's there?
I turn around in surprise. From behind, a dark shadow slowly approached. It was Tyl. Woof. The toy poodle Tyl wags its tail as it approaches me. I was startled by the sudden appearance of my pet. How did you? Where on earth did you come from? For 3 hours, it had been quiet here. Where did it suddenly appear from? As if to answer that mystery, Tyl shows me the path it came from with its nose. Amazingly, there was a small door in the back. Hidden in the shadows, I couldn't notice it with just the unreliable light from the lamp. Apparently, there are 2 entrances here. Opening it, there are more stairs, and going up leads to the backyard. Holding Terrence, I enter the villa from outside in my bare feet. Just before entering the living room, I hear the grating voices of my parents screaming.
Bring out our grandchild now. We're saying we'll raise him.
That child is Calvin's reincarnation. He was born to become a doctor. My parents' claims haven't changed at all. While soothing Terrence, who's about to cry, I peek into the living room. Sherwood and Kitty were standing up to them.
I can't believe you even hired a detective to track this place down. Have you ever thought about Blondie's happiness? Happiness? Someone who brings shame to her parents doesn't deserve that. More importantly, our grandchild. You don't understand anything. That child is my and Blondie's precious baby. He wasn't born as a reincarnation or to become a doctor. He was born to be loved by us,
Sherwood says firmly in a dignified voice. He, who is usually gentle, was looking at my parents with an unusually stern expression. I had no idea he had such a strong side to him.
But he's our grandchild. He's our grandchild too. This is our villa. Please leave.
Kitty is also taking my side, with her back straight, in a resolute manner just like Sherwood. I'm sure they've been having this kind of exchange the whole time. I gulp down my saliva. I have to end this now. Because I'm a mother now. I take a step forward.
Get out. Blondie!
Sherwood and Kitty are surprised by my sudden appearance. I feel bad for them, who were trying to protect me. But this is something I have to bring to a close. I'm the one who should deliver the final words to these people.
You're the ones who disowned me. I thought I had already cut ties with you.
We don't need a useless daughter. Just hand over that grandchild. It would be far better if we raised him. That's right. Calvin, you've come back to us. How adorable. The cruel and arrogant Sean. Alana, who sees nothing but Calvin. I brush away Alana's reaching hand and say in a trembling voice,
I always wanted to be loved by you. I thought maybe one day you would love me. But
I glare at the two of them.
Having this child made me realize I don't need you anymore.
Terrence woke up at my loud voice. I entrusted the crying Terrence to Sherwood and Kitty, and revealed the anger I had never directed at my parents before.
Get out. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police. Police? How dare you talk to your parents like that?
Sean raises one hand. I instinctively close my eyes, bracing for the impact, but Sherwood stands in front of me and stops his arm.
Even if you're Sean, I won't allow that. Ugh.
Sherwood's body is a size larger than Sean's. The difference in physique made even Sean flinch. I quickly pull out my phone and show them the phone app screen displaying 911.
I'm serious. Now get out. Otherwise, I really will call the police.
I was trembling slightly. I stand firm so they don't notice. Faced with my determination, my parents finally seem to be overwhelmed. They turn around and try to leave the living room. They seem to be shouting something at the entrance, but I couldn't make it out. Because I collapsed on the spot from the relief and release of tension.
Blondie! Are you okay?
I'm fine. Sherwood immediately supports me. Having just given birth, opposing my parents seemed to have drained a considerable amount of energy. But for some reason, my heart feels clear now. I was finally able to express my true feelings to my parents. As I naturally smile, feeling refreshed, Sherwood gently smiles back at me. Then, TYL snuggles up and licks my cheek. I'm glad you came. Thank you, TYL. I don't know if TYL, who answers with a bark, understands or not. But it was because I was led by TYL that I was able to leave the basement and face my parents. The defiance against my parents that I couldn't do before. This little one who gave me that opportunity might be my bluebird. Feeling reassured, I fell asleep right there in Sherwood's arms. The next day, when I explained the situation to Evelyn, who came to the house again, she showed a very indignant expression.
My goodness! That happened? From now on, I'll stay over and accompany Blondie. If they come again, I'll chase them away.
Thank you, Evelyn. Evelyn is as reliable as ever.
But I can't believe they would do that to their own child. Right, Kitty?
Huh? Yes. Kitty, spoken to by Evelyn, hung her head for a moment. Kitty has been a little gloomy since last night. I'm filled with a feeling of guilt, thinking she must be tired from dealing with my parents. As for Sherwood, he was busy during the day with birth registration and preparing our new home. And to prevent my parents from finding out about the new home currently being prepared, we also decided to apply for restrictions on viewing Social Security information. This may take some time, but we'll do everything we can. Surrounded by strong allies like him, I also resolved to become stronger myself. That night, the day I was able to rebel, my heart was reborn. I will never let Terrence be taken away. And half a month later, finally, the time for confrontation came again. While taking a walk in the garden, my parents suddenly appeared, having hidden somewhere. They try to forcibly take my Terrence, who I'm holding in my arms.
Hand him over, Blondie. We'll raise this child. Stop it!
They arrogantly claim they'll make him a doctor, that he's Calvin's reincarnation, unchanged from before. Sherwood and Evelyn immediately rush over.
Don't lay a hand on Blondie and Terrence. You guys! I just called the police.
At the word police, my parents involuntarily let go. I declared to the two of them firmly. Not with the momentum driven by anger like before, but in a calm and clear tone.
Stop it. This is kidnapping. Kidnapping! We're just taking our grandchild. I am Terrence's mother. If you take him without my permission, it's clearly kidnapping.
A tense atmosphere hangs in the air. Before, I would have simply cowered in front of my parents. But I'm no longer these people's daughter. I've become Terrence's mother. For the sake of my new family, I'll stand up even to my real parents. Having resolved myself to face my parents, who would surely come someday, I had nothing left to fear. Silence fills the area. And then, a police car really does come, so my parents hurriedly flee.
As if anyone would actually call them. You ungrateful child!
Kitty was filming the whole scene of my parents retreating back as they ran away from afar. Actually, we had discussed gathering evidence the next time the two of them came. This video and the testimony of the police who witnessed it became irrefutable evidence, and the restriction on viewing Social Security information at the government office proceeded smoothly. The people at the office sympathized with me, saying it must have been tough, so the sight of my parents in the video must have been quite unsightly. Watching the video again, I also thought it was disgraceful. I had wished to be loved by these two people. I want to hug my younger self. Then, a month later, we moved into the new home Sherwood had prepared. The large two-story detached house with a garden even has a dog run course for TYL, as I had hoped. It's a lovely garden with a swing where Terrence will surely play someday. This doesn't completely sever ties with my parents, but we were able to put physical distance between us. They no longer know where I live, and I can finally devote myself to raising my child with peace of mind. And the days pass peacefully, though hectic with childcare. Kitty also drops by from time to dote on Terrence. Eventually, Terrence turns 3 and has grown up well. He now spends happy days as a beloved child. Then one day, Sherwood shows me a certain online news article.
Hey, isn't this about Blondie's parents? What?
On the phone screen was an online news article about a local family doctor in my hometown getting flamed on social media. The trigger for the flaming was a post made on social media with their real name, stating that their medical examinations were too high-handed and lacked compassion for patients. If it had been just that, it would have been a common reputation for a doctor and unlikely to become news, but my parents had the nerve to argue back on social media. The mudslinging exchange that followed became a hot topic on social media and eventually caught the public's attention. Also, regarding reviews on their website, they made the mistake of not responding to good reviews but arguing against bad ones. Their arrogant and haughty attitude seemed to be directed not only at me but also at their patients. They brought the patients' anger upon themselves, caused the flaming, and lost credibility. As I read through the contents of the article, it ended with my parents closing down their hospital. For a small private hospital in town, reputation is everything. They probably couldn't keep going. I'm at a loss for words. Just getting flamed and falling this far, their reputation in the local community was probably not that good to begin with, and they had few patients. That's why they desperately needed a successor to make a comeback. My parents, who had been pushing me to become a doctor since I was little. I don't know what made them act that way, but lately, I think I don't even have to try to understand. They tried to make their children and grandchildren clean up their mess, only thinking about themselves. Sherwood asked me worriedly as I held my head. Sorry, I reminded you of it. Maybe I shouldn't have told you. No. I'm glad I know. Thank you. I no longer worry about my parents. But when I think about those parents, I start to worry about the future. Predicting what might happen in the future with those two, I decide to have a talk with Sherwood. And a few months later, as expected, my parents barged into the company where Sherwood works. Even though they don't know our new address, they knew Sherwood's workplace since we told them when we got married. It was my fault for still clinging to my parents back then, but they seem to have targeted this place. However, my parents can't even meet me. We had anticipated that they might barge in and discussed various things beforehand. Even if they barge in, Terrence and I must never go outside. Give them a chance to talk, just once. Deal with it in the president's office. And later, I heard there was an exchange like this. So you came after all, Sean and Alana. What? Well, of course. Blondie already severed ties with you as parents. Then, you're strangers to me too. He had also become stronger after this incident. As the next president, he confronted my parents and asked them why they came here today. As expected, it was money. The private hospital was driven to bankruptcy, and my parents had no connections to any hospitals that would hire them. The lack of connections was probably due to their personalities. Still, they thought they could just open a new practice in a different location. They came to borrow startup funds from the company where Sherwood works. The term shameless might exist just for these people. $100,000. No, even $50,000 will do. We'll pay back the borrowed money properly. That's right. This is a connection too. We'll give up on Terrence, so please. Then Kitty, who had been contacted, arrived. As soon as she burst into the president's office, she said in a strong tone, "You two, enough already. We don't have any money to lend you. Have some shame." A fierce backlash from Kitty, who seems gentle. To the two who were stunned, Kitty showed her last trump card. "I have many acquaintances in the medical field. Many of them are in respectable positions." What? Kitty names a few acquaintances she claims are friends. Each of them seems to be a well-known figure in the medical world, and my parents' faces instantly turned pale. Their foolish actions and personalities have already been conveyed. Arrangements have been made to put pressure on them so they can't open a new private hospital.
How do you have that kind of authority? If you interfere with my son and DIL's happiness, we'll thoroughly interfere with you too.
She was like a fierce god, Sherwood said. My parents are driven out by Kitty's glare. At the company, they were immediately added to the suspicious persons list and can no longer even enter the building. Also, the acquaintances in the medical world that Kitty mentioned seem to be no bluff. In fact, according to information from Kitty, my parents still haven't been able to open a practice.
But why is Kitty going so far to help us?
The reason behind Kitty's actions, putting everything she has into protecting us. Sherwood told me about it. Kitty had also cut ties with her parents, just like me. Hearing about it, Kitty's past was even more devastating and difficult than mine. Until she met Eleanor and got married, she had given up on her own happiness. Hearing that, I remembered an exchange between Evelyn and Kitty 3 years ago.
But I can't believe it. To do that to their own child. Right, Kitty?
Yeah, unbelievable. Kitty's tired expression at that time. That fatigue was because she was recalling her own past. Kitty now works as an accountant. Many of her clients are doctors, so she was able to deal with the situation this time. Also, Evelyn, who helped during the birth, seems to be a well-known figure in the midwife community, and she approached them from there as well. Mom said that by protecting Blondie, she feels like she's saving her past self. So we're the ones who should be thanking you.
Oh, Kitty.
I realized that many people support me and Terrence here. I thought I should go thank Kitty again soon. Then, a few days later, I learned from Kitty's information that my parents had their medical licenses revoked. It turned out that fraudulent practices at their previous private hospital were exposed by a former employee's report. The contents, which could be considered borderline criminal, such as fraudulent billing and violations of the pharmaceutical affairs law, resulted in the harsh punishment of license revocation, not just suspension of practice. As a result, they were left with a large fine and no longer able to call themselves doctors. It's a miserable end for my parents, but it can't be helped. They were too selfish. And it's no longer any of my business. I closed my phone after finishing reading the news. I started preparing a meal for my own family. As if in reaction to my unfortunate childhood, my future was overflowing with happiness. Because things had been so bad until now, I get easily moved to tears even by little things. So much that Terrence says, Blondie is a crybaby. Even Terrence, who says that, is already in 6th grade. He's grown up so much. Today is a classroom observation day. I'm standing next to Sherwood at the back of the classroom. We were listening to everyone read their essays aloud. Next is Terrence's turn.
My family, Terrence from class 6 to 2. My family is Dad, Mom, and our dog TYL.
Terrence's essay was an inoffensive one, mixing a child's honest feelings and public stance. But I listen intently to each and every sentence, as if savoring them. By the time he finishes reading, I can no longer hold back my tears. Terrence is probably going to be exasperated with me again, thinking I'm a crybaby. Sherwood hugs my shoulder as I wipe my tears. Terrence looks back at us from his seat and laughs as if to say, I knew it. My happiness is right here. I deeply savor the happy moments brought to me by our beloved dog TYL, the bluebird child. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. A nurse nearby was surprised and hurried over to me. According to the nurse, it seems I had been in a car accident and had been unconscious for over 3 years. Furthermore, I was told by the nurse that my daughter, Kate, was in the middle of her wedding ceremony. My daughter getting married? I hadn't even heard she had a boyfriend 3 years ago, let alone that she was getting married. Had she grown up so much without me knowing? It was a feeling of happiness and loneliness that I couldn't quite describe as a parent. After a while, when the doctors had calmed down, my daughter rushed over in her wedding dress, having interrupted her ceremony. She must have really hurried. Though her makeup and dress were disheveled, my daughter looked beautiful as a bride. The man standing next to her must be her husband-to-be. He was wearing a tuxedo that matched my daughter's dress very well. Mom, I'm so glad. Tears flowed as my daughter grasped my hand, causing my own tears to well up.
I'm so glad you woke up, Mary.
It was then that I finally realized. This man was David, a colleague from my workplace. Unbeknownst to me, my daughter had married my colleague. You've become so wonderful. This moment of emotion was brief as the two began to whisper seriously to each other. What should we do? Our plan has. I heard such words. Plan? I repeated the words I heard. In place of my stunned daughter, David began to speak with a serious expression.
Mary. Actually, we intended to do something at today's wedding.
David then explained everything leading up to today's plan from the beginning. When I woke up, I was in an unfamiliar place. I couldn't immediately remember why I was here. But I knew it was a hospital. And then I could remember my name. My name is Mary. As I looked around, trying to remember what happened before I got here, I locked eyes with a nearby nurse. The nurse was surprised and rushed over to me. According to the nurse, it seems I had been in a car accident and had been unconscious for over 3 years. 3 years. I did a quick calculation of my age before losing consciousness. It seems I had merely slept and turned 52. The nurse who kindly spoke to me called another nurse, and then my primary doctor was called. Soon, the primary doctor came to my room to check on me. One nurse said,
We'll contact your family,
and left the room. Another nurse informed me that my daughter, Kate, was in the middle of her wedding ceremony. From the doctor's rush, I could tell that my waking up was almost a miracle. But what about this? Kate is getting married? I hadn't even heard she had a boyfriend 3 years ago, let alone that she was getting married. Had she grown up so much without me knowing? It was a mix of happiness and loneliness I couldn't quite describe as a parent. After confirming there was nothing wrong with me, the primary doctor said,
I'm really glad you woke up,
and showed me a smile before leaving the room. After the doctors had calmed down, Kate rushed over in her wedding dress. She must have really hurried. Though her makeup and dress were disheveled, Kate looked beautiful as a bride. I wished I could have seen her like this at the ceremony. The man standing next to her must be Kate's husband. He was wearing a tuxedo that matched Kate's dress very well. Mom, I'm so glad. Tears flowed as Kate grasped my hand, causing my own tears to well up.
I'm so glad you woke up, Mary.
It was then that I realized. This man was David, a colleague from my workplace. Unbeknownst to me, Kate had married my colleague. You've become so wonderful. He looked different than he did 3 years ago, not just because of his outfit, but his face had matured. He had become a truly distinguished adult man. This moment of emotion was short-lived. The two began to whisper seriously to each other. After all, they had interrupted their important wedding ceremony for my sake. What should we do? Our plan has. I barely took in the content, but I heard those words. Plan? I repeated the words I heard. In place of my stunned daughter, David began to speak with a serious expression.
Mary. Actually, we intended to do something at today's wedding.
David revealed everything leading up to today's plan. The story goes back to before I had the accident. I met Tom, a year older than me, through business dealings with a client, and he pursued me passionately until we got married. We were blessed with our precious daughter, Kate, who turned 24 this year, making us a family of 3. However, I hadn't always felt happy. My husband hardly did any housework at all. I accepted his proposal because, before we were married, he seemed like someone who would cherish me and not be like this. "It's nice for you. You earn more than I do." He changed after we got married. He knew before we got married that I earned more, and he said, "Let's both work and help each other out with the housework after we get married." But once we were married, he constantly complained about me earning more. Feeling inferior because he was outdone by me in both work and housework, my husband probably wanted to assert his dominance through words. At home, he began to nag me persistently. "I wish you would stop saying things like that." At first, I tried to argue back and discuss things. However, no matter what I said, my husband would deny it and not accept anything I said. It was impossible to have a discussion with him. Gradually, I found arguing back tiresome and decided to just ignore everything. No matter what was said, I didn't argue back or show any sign of being upset. I thought he might stop if I didn't react, but instead, my silence seemed to give him free rein to say whatever he wanted. Yet knowing it was futile to argue back, I kept enduring, not letting his words disturb me. Then one day, I discovered I was pregnant. I was genuinely happy about being blessed with a child. "I want 1 boy and 1 girl," my husband used to say with a smile before we got married, and I thought he loved children and would help with parenting. So, I believed that once our child was born, my husband would change. But the reality was different. Even after Kate was born, his attitude didn't change, and I ended up managing work, housework, and now childcare, all by myself. However, divorce was not an option for me. Fortunately, my husband never became violent, nor was he ever verbally abusive towards Kate. And more than anything, I didn't want Kate to grow up without a father. Everything was for Kate's sake. With that single-minded purpose, I endured whatever my husband said. I wonder if my husband forgot about wanting 2 children. Since Kate's birth, my husband and I hadn't even slept in the same bed. Kate seemed to understand my feelings and grew up well-adjusted. Eventually, she graduated from college, found a job, and moved out. I was happy to see Kate become a respectable adult, but that's when the tragedy started. As soon as it was just my husband and me at home, his nagging intensified more than before. His overtime increased, and he spent less time at home, but his words towards me became more extreme. Due to stress and fatigue, I ended up crashing into a pole while driving and have been unconscious for 3 years. When Kate was informed about the accident, she left work early and rushed over. The surgery was successful, but the doctor said, "It's uncertain when she'll wake up, and it wouldn't be surprising if she passed away at any time." But the doctor said. Hearing that, Kate decided to take care of me and has been doing so ever since. As for my husband, he left all the caregiving to Kate and lived freely. Somehow, my husband maintained a good appearance outside, so he received courteous treatment from colleagues and neighbors who heard about my condition. It's always been like this. He's pleasant to everyone but me, liked by women in the neighborhood, and, from what I hear about his position and relationships at work, he wasn't regarded poorly. So, I was completely fooled by him before we got married. The way he acted after we got married was the real him. He wanted to be a good person outside, but at home, he wanted someone in a weaker position than himself, like a wife, to dominate. However, since I managed both housework and childcare, and eventually outperformed him in work, he probably felt the need to assert his dominance by saying whatever he wanted every day. Apart from my husband and Kate, The only other people who came to visit me in the hospital were my best friend Jane and my colleague David. Kate knows Jane is my best friend. I've had Jane over a few times, and during those visits, she met Kate. David came to visit 2 days after I was hospitalized, and that's when he and Kate had their first one-on-one conversation.
I'll come to visit now and then. Don't overdo it.
Jane and David were considerate towards Kate. Indeed, Jane made sure to visit once every month or two, and Kate was grateful for that. Kate and David met when he came to visit me in the hospital. David had joined my company as a new graduate. Since we graduated from the same university, I ended up looking out for him quite a bit. I remember being pleased to take care of him as if he were a son, since he was 2 years older than my daughter. I've resolved a few work-related issues for David, and he seemed to be grateful for that. Wanting to do something for me while I was hospitalized, he frequently showed up to offer support to Kate as well. Through my hospitalization, Kate began to realize that her father's attitude towards me was strange. As Kate grew closer to David, she started to confide in him about her uncooperative father, which led to their relationship becoming more intimate and eventually turning into a romance. Kate had repeatedly urged her father to visit me, but he kept refusing, citing work as the reason. In reality, my husband only visited me once the day after the accident occurred. He couldn't be reached on the day of the accident and only showed up at the hospital for 30 minutes the next day before leaving quickly. He seemed sad that day, but I'm sure that was just an act to appear sympathetic to others. I know him. Given his past behavior, there's no way my husband would genuinely worry about me being in a coma. He's always been good at presenting a favorable image to others. Then one day, when Kate went to pick up some of my belongings from our house, she witnessed something shocking. This discovery led to the plan they intended to carry out at the wedding. Unbelievably, my husband and Jane were having an affair at our home. That day, he had told her he was at work. All his claims of being at work were lies. Taking advantage of my coma, he had started bringing Jane into our home. Kate left without letting them know she was there and immediately consulted with David.
Let's gather evidence of the affair for now.
David calmed Kate down and advised her to take a rational approach. They began to quietly gather evidence of the affair without letting my husband or Jane know. It turned out that my husband and Jane had been having an affair even before I fell into a coma. And on the day of my accident, he was with Jane. Now it makes sense why my husband's overtime increased after Kate started her job. It was because of the affair. But I had stopped loving my husband enough to suspect him of having an affair. After I was gone, it seemed they planned to remarry using the inheritance from my parents that would go to my husband. Among the evidence of their affair was a brochure for a honeymoon trip. I had heard that they were waiting for the inheritance from my parents, who had passed away years ago and left a considerable sum to go to my husband. When I discussed it with him,
"We'll save this for an emergency,"
I had said. If I were gone, all the inheritance would go to my husband. The thought of him using that for his remarriage to Jane was horrifying. Kate and David had gathered enough evidence of the affair, employing a detective as well. 2 years after I fell into a coma.
Considering everything with Mary and David, I know it's been tough. But I'll always be here to support you. Marry me.
David proposed to Kate, and they got engaged. Simultaneously, David came up with a plan.
Let's show everyone the evidence of Tom and Jane's affair at our wedding.
Kate agreed to the plan, and they began preparing for the wedding. Unaware of such preparations, my husband and Jane continued to enjoy their affair, thinking I was none the wiser. Jane still visited me regularly, for reasons unknown. Was she looking at my unconscious face? Praying for me to disappear? It's distressing to think about. Kate didn't know how to act around Jane, who kept visiting despite her affair with Kate's father. It's bizarre to act normal around the woman having an affair with your father. Every time Kate saw Jane, she was reminded of her being with her father at home and felt the urge to yell at her. Yet, to ensure the success of their plan, she maintained her composure, pretending not to know anything. Apparently, Jane visited while David was there. That was the first time David and Jane met face to face. They only had a trivial conversation. Jane expressed concern for Kate and David, talked about me, and spent about 30 minutes chatting in the room. The atmosphere wasn't bad at all, sometimes even filled with laughter.
"That woman is the mistress,"
David murmured after Jane had left. I think even from Jane's demeanor that day, David couldn't possibly imagine she was involved in an affair. Afterward, Kate and David discussed Jane. Jane was the same age as me but looked younger for her age. She dressed nicely, wore her makeup well, and took great care of her figure. A stark contrast to me, who had been too busy to care much for appearances. Not that I looked terrible, of course. I hadn't heard much about Jane's love life before. She married around the same time as me but ended up divorcing within 5 years. Her ex-husband didn't seem like a bad person. But I thought it wasn't good to delve too deeply into her divorce, so I never asked. And I had no idea about her romantic life afterward. However, Jane seemed to have a fulfilling work and social life, so she didn't appear eager to remarry. The fact that she would have an affair was shocking. Or perhaps her past romantic experiences had led to this. I can't and don't want to understand the mindset of someone who has an affair, but Jane and I had been close friends since college, for decades. It's a shame she was the only person I could call a best friend. The wedding preparations for the two of them were coming to a climax.
"If we play this at the end of the reception,"
Kate, looking at the finished tape, got a big nod from David. Their plan was to show a video of my husband's affair at the end of the wedding. Both my husband and Jane were invited to the ceremony and indeed attended that day. All that was left was to play the video. Kate and David imagined the faces of Jane and my husband when the video was shown. Neither my husband nor Jane could have imagined that their affair would be exposed to all the guests at the end of the wedding. This would be a great humiliation for both of them. Now, they just had to wait for the wedding day. The plan had progressed smoothly so far. The wedding began as scheduled, and the reception was nearing its end without any issues. Just before the video was to be played, the hospital called to say I had woken up. The wedding was immediately interrupted. Kate and David, still in their wedding attire, hopped into a taxi and came to the hospital, leading to the current moment.
"This is everything that happened while you were unconscious, Mary."
David finished telling the story.
"My husband had an affair with Jane."
After my whisper, no one spoke. In the silent room, I was left to ponder alone. Hearing the story wasn't enough for me to fully believe it. That my husband, not content with just nagging me, would have an affair with my best friend. How low could a person sink? I might have been oblivious, but of all people, the mistress was my friend Jane. If that's true, they're both insane. Having an affair right under my nose and enjoying it while I was unconscious is unforgivable. Unable to speak further, the door to the hospital room eventually opened. My husband and Jane appeared.
"I'm so glad you woke up."
Truly. Jane was the first to rush to my side. My husband followed, feigning concern. Since Kate, David, and now a nurse who had just arrived were present, they were probably putting on a show. After the nurse, who accompanied my husband and Jane, left, I briefly greeted her and then turned to look at my husband and Jane. Somehow, I was able to think about my husband and Jane calmly. They were dressed too nicely, probably still in their reception attire. But considering Kate and David came from the same place, they took too long to arrive. 30 minutes too long. What could that mean? Could it be that they came together, regretting my awakening and taking their time? That thought disgusted me. Contemplating how they must have wished for my absence, I shook off Jane's hand.
You! How dare you treat a friend who came all the way here like that?
Jane, taken aback, said nothing. My husband stepped forward to defend her. Was this a woman's intuition? Seeing their interaction convinced me of their affair's reality.
Kate, David, please kick these two out. Please.
Jane looked confused, unable to grasp the situation, while my husband was just showing his anger. To them, I added more.
I've heard about your affair. I've put up with everything until now, but it's over. We're getting a divorce. And Jane, you are no longer a friend or anything to me. Just a stranger. Please never show up in front of me again.
Upon hearing these words, Jane glared back at me, revealing her true nature before my husband could react.
You should have just left the money. You're just in the way of our happiness.
Jane approached me with an expression I had never seen before. Kate stopped her, and David restrained my husband.
You really think you'll be okay without me? You'll regret this.
Even now, my husband tried to assert his dominance with his words. He forgot Kate and David were there and lashed out at me as usual.
Yes. I'm better off without you.
I looked at him coldly. His face turned red rapidly. Gradually, both my husband and Jane's voices grew louder and harsher until the nurses came to see what was happening. The nurse tried to calm down Jane and my husband, saying,
"This is a hospital, please."
But they wouldn't quiet down. Eventually, Jane and my husband were kicked out of the hospital.
I never imagined confronting them about the affair in such a way.
Once the commotion settled, I finally took a breath in the quiet room.
Kate, David, thank you so much.
I would like to express my gratitude to the two of them, which I haven't been able to express yet. I hadn't yet expressed my gratitude to them for looking after me during the 3 years I was unconscious and for thoroughly investigating my husband and Jane's affair. I couldn't thank them enough. Kate and David exchanged glances before David knelt before me.
Mary, I apologize for the late introduction. Please allow me to marry Kate. I promise to make her happy.
David said nervously. He was just a cute colleague 3 years ago, but he had supported me and Kate throughout these years. I had no intention of denying their marriage.
Of course. David, I trust you with my daughter. Be happy together.
David smiled in relief at my response. Soon after, I was discharged from the hospital. Many things happened until my discharge, and Kate and David kept me updated. First, their wedding was cancelled, and they sent apologies to all invitees, including the evidence of the affair planned for the last part of the wedding. Though the original plan and method differed, all invitees eventually learned of the affair. My husband's company had dealings with the hospital I was admitted to, and the hospital incident became known to his company, revealing his affair. His standing at work became significantly uncomfortable. Though he wasn't fired, at least. Jane, too, faced severe backlash, known as the worst woman for stealing a friend's husband and causing her to fall into a coma. Though the story might be exaggerated, such punishment seemed just. I divorced him and got compensation from both. Our house was in my name, so I sold it, leaving my ex-husband homeless. The compensation led to financial difficulties for him. I found a new place for myself and lived comfortably. I planned to return to work after the accident, but the aftermath made it impossible. However, I had enough from the compensation, condolence money, and savings to live comfortably. I decided to enjoy life and pick up new hobbies, making up for the lost 3 years. I heard my ex-husband and Jane broke up after a huge fight. Jane was apparently after money, and my ex-husband had pretended to earn more than he did. I had never bothered to talk about this with Jane either, so Jane seemed to think that her ex-husband was making a lot of money. Jane exploded when she realized the truth after being kicked out and facing demands for compensation.
"Thought you had money, that's why I wanted to remarry,"
she reportedly said. It's a rumor, but perhaps she wanted a second chance at happiness. Still, I feel no sympathy. It seems my ex-husband was easily fooled by Jane, who appeared to respect him. While it's a bit sad to see them lose everything, I wonder if they've experienced the same or even greater hardship than I did during these 3 years. Seeing them like this, I feel a sense of closure. There was a time my ex-husband, having lost everything, managed to find me. I was wrong. Please, let's start over. He pleaded with me for the first time, but I called the police to take him away. After a thorough talk with the police, I believe he won't come to see me again. Feeling fear when he suddenly appeared was a first for me, seeing him in such a state. Since then, Kate and David have been living happily together. They even chose their home close to my new place. Occasionally, they come over to visit, or we go out together. I truly feel this is the happiest I've ever been. I'm looking forward to seeing my grandchildren someday. When I received the handset handed to me, a man on the other end claimed to be a police officer.
Just a moment ago, a man claiming to be your husband was transported by ambulance after falling from his wheelchair. We would like to speak with you about it. Can you come to the hospital urgently?
I was so shocked by the sudden news that I became flustered.
My husband? Understood. I'm at work right now, so I'll check with my boss and head over immediately.
I inquired about the hospital to which he was transported, and despite being in the middle of a meeting, I explained the situation, obtained permission from my boss, and left the office. Catching a taxi immediately, I headed to the hospital where 2 police officers and my husband, Ben, were waiting in the room I was guided to. As soon as I entered the room, Ben pointed at me and shouted,
"It's her! She's the one who knocked over the wheelchair! Wait a minute! What are you talking about?"
I was completely taken aback by the abrupt accusation, confused about what was happening. Me, knocking over Ben's wheelchair? After all, I went straight to work from a business trip today, so it had been roughly 2 days since I last saw him. As I stood there in shock, unable to speak, Ben raised his voice.
"Because of what you did, I want a divorce. And prepare compensation. $30,000. Wait a minute. Why would?"
My voice trembled as I was completely overwhelmed.
"Can we discuss the details at the police station?"
The officer stated firmly, urging me to accompany them. Despite explaining multiple times at the police station that I had been at work, the misunderstanding continued, increasing my anxiety. Then, an unexpected person showed up. It was Emma, the chief of Ben's shop. My name is Anne, 43 years old. I work for a company related to health food. Mainly dealing with beauty supplements, I'm busy running around the sales office with my team for new product proposals. My husband, Ben, who is 2 years my senior, runs a beauty salon on his own, thankfully never short of customers. We met when we were both students, working part-time at the same pub. One time, he protected me from a drunk customer, which started our conversation. From there, we hit it off over shared interests in beauty, and while I was swayed by Ben's assertive nature, I was also drawn to his reliability in times of need and married him a few years later. By then, we were both working professionals, Ben had finished vocational school and was apprenticing at a salon, and I had settled into my job at the current company. I chose to continue working even after marriage. Partly because Ben's income as a hairstylist alone was not enough for both of us to live on, but also because I wanted to build my career. We decided not to have children, opting instead to dedicate our time to work and hobbies. A decision that often surprises our friends, though neither Ben nor I mind. We believe in each having our own form of family. My work schedule varies, with some days ending at regular hours and others requiring overtime. As for holidays, I usually have weekends and public holidays off. Ben generally returns home around the same time each day, but has irregular holidays due to shift work. Hence, our homecoming times and days off vary. But we're both content living our lives, enjoying our hobbies. I'm into bodybuilding, often spending my free time at the gym. Protein supplements are a staple at home, and drinking them after gym sessions has become a routine, also serving as a chance to test our products. Ben's hobby is working on and touring with his motorcycle. There's a small garage behind our house where his prized large motorcycle is kept. He's been passionate about bikes since before we met, collecting tools, parts, and even antique components. Once, he said, "I'm worried about the bike because a typhoon is hitting us directly," and spent the night in the garage in a sleeping bag, worried about his newly changed tires getting damaged.
Hey, it's dangerous. Why don't you come inside?
I'm more worried about the bike than myself. I can't sleep thinking about it getting damaged. His serious tone left me utterly dumbfounded, and I couldn't say anything more. However, about 2 months ago, Ben had an accident while riding with his touring group and broke his leg. I was off that day and shocked when I received the call from the hospital. Seeing him in a wheelchair with a broken right leg, I asked,
"Are you okay? Are you planning to close the shop?"
"If we close, Emma would be in trouble. Of course, we'll keep the shop open." Emma has been working at Ben's beauty salon since its opening. She is entrusted with the role of chief and is popular with customers due to her brisk and friendly nature. "Really? But how will you get to work? The house and the shop are a bit far apart. You always said it takes you about 20 minutes to walk, right? I have work too, so it's difficult for me to drive you. The shop opens at 10 a.m., but I leave the house by 8 a.m. It's extremely dangerous for him to go that distance in a wheelchair by himself, considering it takes 20 minutes on foot without a fracture."
"Yeah, that's true. I can't drive a car either, so I'll discuss it with Emma."
Later, Ben and Emma talked it over, and it was decided that Emma would drive him. I complained about her having to leave her house earlier because of this, but Ben said it was Emma who offered to do the driving.
"She said she's the owner's right arm and got all excited about it."
Though he seemed a bit troubled saying it, Ben didn't seem entirely displeased either. I'm too busy to meddle in the shop's affairs, but I can't help feeling astonished at my husband's situation. For the past 2 months, we've relied on her for Ben's transportation, feeling both guilty and grateful. Once, when I visited the shop because I needed to talk to Ben, I had a conversation with Emma, who seems to be actively taking hair supplements. I occasionally bring our company's hair supplements as a token of appreciation, always thanking her. "Emma, are you sure it's not too much of a burden? Are you okay?"
"I'm fine. I'm tough, so this is nothing for me."
"I'm sorry, it just feels like..."
"Don't worry about it. By the way, the supplement you brought last time was amazing. I even shared some with my friends and recommended it."
Her always cheerful demeanor somehow felt reassuring. I'm proud that such a bright and wonderful girl is the face of this beauty salon.
"Actually, I have a business trip coming up, but could you cut my hair before I leave? Just a trim is fine. Where are you going? I'm expecting souvenirs, you know.
She joked as she pulled out the appointment book from behind the counter and flipped to the reservation page. It's nothing special. I laughed along as I chose an available date and time. Then I'll see you in a week.
Yes, please.
The week flew by, and on the day I was to cut Emma's hair, I stopped by the shop during a break from work, just as the previous customer, a woman in her 50s with a soft bob and light perm, was leaving. The woman walked out briskly, looking youthful. Emma, who was behind the counter, watched her leave, then looked down to write something in the appointment book. As I entered, she looked up and momentarily appeared awkward, but quickly returned to her usual smile. Hello. Could you wait just a moment? I'll be ready in no time. She said this and quickly cleaned up the hair on the floor and sanitized the chair, finishing everything in about 3 minutes. Sorry to keep you waiting. Please, have a seat here. I sat down in the indicated chair and looked at myself in the mirror. I hadn't had a haircut in a while and looked quite aged. How careless can I get? To my spontaneous remark, Emma laughed. Not at all. You just want a trim today, right?
That's right. I'm thinking of growing it out to try this style next.
I tapped my phone, showing her a hair catalog webpage, and pointed to a photo of a shoulder-length hairstyle.
Do you think it would suit me?
It'll look great. You have a bit of a wave in the back here, so we'll make sure to cover that. It'll suit you perfectly. Emma gestured.
You'll look fantastic. Let's do it.
And exclaimed over the mirror. Even though the shop played calming music box tunes and maintained a peaceful atmosphere, something felt off, like a mix of unease beneath Emma's steady hands and expressions. Maybe it was intuition. Despite the ordinary setting with music box tunes, Emma's expressions, the sound of scissors, and our chat, something seemed different. Since it was just a trim, the haircut was finished quicker than usual, and I paid before leaving. I decided to head home immediately due to my next appointment, but as she saw me off, I couldn't help but notice she seemed a bit down. I impulsively asked her,
Emma, are you tired? Are you getting enough rest?
Not at all. Do I have dark circles? I've been watching dramas late into the night recently. She laughed off, making me second-guess my concern.
If you're feeling good, then that's great. Thanks for today.
Good luck on your business trip. I waved back at her encouragement and left the shop. That night, as I looked up at the beautiful full moon on my way home, I found Ben had unusually come home before me. I was a bit surprised as I put down my things and started preparing dinner.
Hey, I got a haircut from Emma today. What do you think?
Ben looked up from his motorcycle magazine and said, It doesn't seem much different.
Can't you say something nice like it suits me? I just got it trimmed today. Thought I should groom myself once in a while.
I retorted, to which Ben scoffed. We're both in our 40s, what's there to suit or not? His comment, whether a joke or his real thoughts, was followed by him returning to his magazine. Lately, or maybe for a few years now, I've felt Ben being somewhat cold towards me. I remember how he used to praise me for even a small haircut, saying I looked beautiful, and wonder if we were just younger back then. Speaking of today, I was a bit worried about Emma. She seemed a bit down. She said she was fine, but I wonder if something is burdening her. Suddenly, Ben became visibly annoyed and said, Are you saying you don't like her driving me around? That's not what I said. I'm just worried about Emma.
Then don't worry. I know her well enough. Don't meddle in the shop's affairs.
Sorry, no need to get so mad. After dinner, Ben and I ate, and I decided to go to bed early to prepare for tomorrow's business trip. The next day, I left home early in the morning and took the train. I had a meeting with a client and then another meeting at the head office, planning to spend a busy day before staying overnight at a hotel and returning early the next morning by train. Sitting on the train, I opened my planner to check my schedule for the day, realizing I had meetings from morning till evening. This is going to be a headache, I murmured while eating a sandwich I had bought earlier. Though business trips aren't frequent, I thought it was nice to have a taste of travel now and then. Arriving at my destination, the cool autumn breeze felt refreshing as I stood on the platform. It was a nice start to the day. My office has 3 meeting rooms, and the largest one was where the meeting began. It was still morning when I started feeling a bit sleepy. The door opened, and a clerk looked around, spotted me, and came over with a phone handset.
For me?
As I took the handset, a man on the other end identified himself as a police officer.
Just a moment ago, a man claiming to be your husband was transported by ambulance after falling from his wheelchair. Can you come to the hospital urgently?
I was so shocked by the sudden news that I became flustered.
My husband? Understood. I'm at work right now, so I'll check with my boss and head over immediately.
I found out which hospital he was taken to, explained the situation to my boss during the meeting, and left the office. Catching a taxi immediately, I headed to the hospital where 2 police officers and Ben were waiting in the room I was guided to. As soon as I entered the room, Ben pointed at me and shouted,
"It's her! She's the one who knocked over the wheelchair! Wait a minute! What are you talking about?"
I was completely taken aback by the abrupt accusation, confused about what was happening. Me, knocking over Ben's wheelchair? Besides, I went straight to work from a business trip today, so it had been roughly 2 days since I last saw him. As I stood there in shock, unable to speak, a young-looking officer confirmed with Ben.
"Is it really her?" "Yes, that's her. I saw it with my own eyes. Anne, I never dreamed you would do such a thing. You've been timing this, haven't you?" "What are you talking about? There's no way I would do that. Because you did this, I'm getting a divorce. And prepare the compensation. $30,000.
Wait a minute. Why would? My voice trembled as I was completely overwhelmed. One of the 2 police officers, a bigger-built man, turned to me and asked where I was about an hour ago when Ben fell, and if I was with anyone. I answered with a shaky voice,
"I was in a meeting at work at that time,"
honestly telling them.
"Please believe me."
Indeed, they had called my workplace. Since I was attending a meeting, both my boss and colleagues could vouch for me. It should be clear to them that I wasn't the perpetrator once they verify with them. The younger-looking officer began.
"Is that so? But we'll need to hear the details at the police station,"
he said with a scoff, implying disbelief, and I was taken into custody.
"If you check with my workplace, it'll all be clear." "Of course, we'll do that, but this is a hospital, not a place for interrogation. And currently, we also have to consider the possibility of attempted murder on your husband,"
the officer stated clearly, urging me to accompany them. Reluctantly, I followed them and informed my workplace that I wouldn't be able to return today, heading to the police station. As I was leaving the room, I saw Ben smiling broadly, looking satisfied as if everything was settled. And I didn't miss the sound of him making a call as I stepped into the hallway. At the police station, I kept repeating the same thing. "So, I was at work at that time. You know my workplace's number, right?" I mustered up the courage to reiterate that I had an alibi, asking them to verify with my company. However, they were reluctant to release me, and my anxiety grew. What would be my motive? Why would I push Ben's wheelchair? Could be for the insurance money, or to have all the property to yourself. I would never do something this stupid just for that. No matter what I said, the police officer wouldn't believe me, and the clock's hands just kept moving forward meaninglessly. After a while, suddenly, Emma came to visit me at the police station. A woman in her 50s who looked a lot like her was with her. Apparently, this was Emma's mother. I'm really sorry for coming out of the blue. And I'm really sorry. Unlike the usual Emma, she began to apologize abruptly with a face that looked like she was about to cry. I was so surprised that I couldn't even speak. I just got a call from the owner, hearing that you were taken by the police. I consulted with Mom. We came here to clear name and claim your innocence. What do you mean? Then Emma started explaining everything, which roughly went like this. Emma had started dating Ben a few years ago and gradually fell for him. Ben, too, became serious about his relationship with Emma, saying, I'll divorce and eventually, so please wait for me. However, even after 2 or 3 years, there was no progress, and Ben showed no signs of divorcing, so Emma told him they should break up and she would quit the shop, to which he replied yesterday. I've thought of a good method. He said. A good method? Yes. That's about today's incident. The plan was to first make his wheelchair fall in a ditch on a deserted roadside, claim to the police and the ambulance that someone had made him fall. And when I arrived, and is the criminal, he would tell the police, and in my confusion, demand a divorce and compensation. Of course, I was against it because it was impossible, but the owner said you were weak to pressure, so it would be fine. Moreover, after the divorce, we could get married and use the compensation money for a trip. I felt dizzy. In other words, Ben was staging a self-directed drama involving the police and hospital to divorce me. This even surprised the young police officer who was listening by my side. It's originally my fault for having an affair with the owner. It's also my fault for not stopping the owner even though I knew about this plan. I've wrongfully accused you, and I'm truly sorry. I was shocked to have been cheated on, and indeed, I was dumbfounded. Somehow regaining my composure and facing Emma, I clearly and slowly told her. Emma, I appreciate you telling me about Ben's plan. But what you did can't be easily forgiven. Do you understand that? Yes, I understand. Emma looked me in the eye and answered firmly. Indeed, she seemed like a tough girl. Afterward, the 2 police officers who had brought me in changed their expressions upon hearing Emma's testimony and went out to question Ben. And a few hours later, he was arrested for making false statements to the police and causing disorder in their operations. Why has it come to this? He was complaining when he came to the police station, but I thought it was his responsibility and didn't feel like defending him even when we were both being questioned. That day, I was the only one released, and I went home with Emma. Eventually, Ben avoided jail time by paying a fine, but in a small town, rumors spread quickly, and several regulars canceled their reservations. Customers decreased, and eventually, the shop had to close. Having lost his credibility, he couldn't find a job as a hairdresser in his hometown. As for me, I decided that I couldn't continue with someone who tried to frame me and immediately presented him with divorce papers to leave. Until the end, Ben refused to sign the divorce papers, saying, "You're all I have. Can't you reconsider the divorce?" He said that, but I coldly pointed out his affair with Emma. "You've been telling Emma for years that you'd divorce me, right?" You really wanted to divorce, didn't you? Now is the time, isn't it? Then Ben turned pale and said,
It's not like that. It's a misunderstanding.
Thinking about it, maybe his relationship with Emma was just a game to him, but I couldn't help feeling a bit of sympathy for her. Afterward, Emma submitted her resignation to Ben, told him they were done, and moved to a different place right away. Between us, she stopped by my place just before moving to give me her new address.
And I'm really sorry for the trouble I've caused. This is my new address. Please send the claim for the compensation here.
She had prepared herself to do all this. Knowing how briskly and cheerfully she used to serve customers in the shop only made my heart ache more. I took the envelope Emma handed me.
Understood.
I nodded. I wonder what she felt all these years being with me. I wanted to ask her something mean, but the thought was too frightening, and I never could bring myself to ask.
Emma, take care, okay?
That was all I could manage to say. Emma nodded with tearful eyes and left. I haven't seen her since then. As for Ben, by that time, we were separated, and he was living a part-time life alone. He persistently sent me messages updating me on his life, trying to evoke sympathy, but I continued to ignore those messages with a firm stance. Eventually, through a lawyer, the divorce with Ben was finalized, and I nearly ended up paying compensation, but instead, I was the one to receive it. It was exactly $30,000. Ben's debt ballooned as he struggled to pay this, ending up in financial trouble. He already had debts from closing the beauty salon and its procedures. Now, he started doing multiple part-time jobs to pay them off. Regarding Emma, the lawyer asked,
You could claim compensation from her as well. What would you like to do?
I was hesitant for a long time. Being betrayed was certainly a shock, and knowing that Ben grew cold towards me because of her made me angry. However, for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. Maybe she, too, wanted the affair to be exposed somewhere deep down, having energetically worked as the shop's chief and supported Ben, and even during the moments at the police station and our farewell. Maybe she wanted to end the relationship but couldn't. This is just my speculation, and I know it sounds naive. But still, I felt it would be cruel to claim compensation from her, so I told the lawyer.
I won't claim anything from Emma. I'm grateful for her support of my husband's shop and for helping me at the police station.
The lawyer, in a businesslike manner, merely replied,
Is that so?
And looked at another document. I received the compensation from my ex-husband and have since thrown myself into work and my hobby, bodybuilding, with renewed vigor. My bosses and colleagues were surprised by the divorce, but I wasn't pitted strangely and have been able to return to my calm daily life as before. It's been several weeks since the divorce chaos and compensation claim procedures. On a cool holiday morning and evening, while organizing my chest, the envelope with the new address given by Emma appeared. I had completely forgotten about it since finishing the conversation with the lawyer.
I don't need this anymore.
I put strength into the middle of the envelope, tearing it in half, then tore it into smaller pieces and threw it away. I haven't been in touch with her since, but I wonder if she's still working as a hairstylist somewhere. Glancing at the mirror, I noticed my hair had grown longer since the last time she cut it. Thinking it was about time to get a haircut again, I tapped the screen of my mobile phone to search for a beauty salon. I was sick in bed, which caused a huge delay in preparing for Christmas. While I was busily working, my husband Oliver had gone out somewhere. Entering Oliver's room, I noticed a bag sticking out of a drawer. I picked it up. Inside the bag was an SD card. Seeing it placed with a message card that read for Oliver, I had a bad feeling. Just as Oliver returned home, I waited for him to take a shower and sneaked back into his room to check the contents on the computer.
What is this?
I was shocked at the footage. At the same time, anger surged through me. I'm going to divorce him. Determined, I gathered our relatives at our home the next day.
Now, please look at this.
As my voice caught the attention of the relatives and Oliver towards the TV, I pressed the play button. The scene that appeared left our relatives speechless and Oliver pale.
Why?
To Oliver, who turned to me in disbelief, I smiled and handed him the divorce papers. I will never forgive him, I'll make him regret this. My name is Sophia. A 34-year-old housewife. My parents passed away early, but thanks to a large inheritance and the kindness of the neighbors, I could pursue my dream job as a preschool teacher. I resigned from teaching when I was 30. To marry my childhood friend, Oliver. The catalyst for our relationship was my parents' accidental death. Being a high school student and facing college entrance exams, I didn't want to move. I was determined to attend the college my parents had supported. However, my relatives, eyeing the large inheritance left by my parents, tried to take me in. Almost strangers to me, their intentions felt creepy. Oliver, my husband-to-be, shooed these relatives away when I was vulnerable from losing my parents. Oliver, the eldest son of our neighboring family, was like an older brother to me. In front of the relatives, he declared,
"We'll take care of her. We have permission from my parents, so no complaints. Sophia will be my wife in the future."
Surprised by Oliver's words, who I had always seen as a brother, he turned out to be serious, confessing his feelings later. His earnest nature and the security he provided became my solace, and we started dating. Oliver always prioritized me, and eventually, I genuinely fell in love with him. When I became comfortable in my job as a preschool teacher, he proposed. I meant what I said when we were students. My feelings haven't changed. I will make you happy, marry me. Absolutely. Overwhelmed, I accepted his proposal with tears. Telling his parents, they rejoiced, and we celebrated that night. After marrying and 2 years of marriage, I retired to become a housewife. Oliver had requested me to become a housewife, something that triggered this change. Though it was sad to leave my dream job, I decided to focus on having children and use my experience in parenting. Oliver has a younger sister. Emma, my sister-in-law, was my classmate since kindergarten. She was also my best friend and colleague at the childcare center. Emma had mixed feelings about me marrying Oliver. That is because she and Oliver don't get along. Oliver has always been kind to you, but unreasonable to me. Really? Absolutely. I often listened without arguing, as Emma insisted. According to Emma, she was delighted to have me as a relative. But not as Oliver's wife. Pretending to lament, she often complained about marrying her disliked brother. From my perspective, though Oliver might be somewhat cold to Emma, it was clear they were still connected by blood. However, Emma didn't seem to think so, often showing dissatisfaction when I suggested this. Sophia, you say that because you don't know Oliver's true face. I wonder. I always responded, doubting Emma's claims. Looking back, I regret not paying more attention, but at that time, I thought it was just sibling dynamics. But even after 5 years of marriage, we didn't have any children. Then, I noticed a gradual change in Oliver's attitude. At first, he complained about our housework being split equally since I became a housewife, and soon, I was doing 90% of it.
Without kids and just relaxing at home all day, you could at least do a bit more housework, right?
These unkind words, something the old Oliver would never say, hurt me, but I accepted them as my duty as a housewife. From there, Oliver started to push more household responsibilities on me, citing my role as a housewife. One day, while visiting my in-laws, Oliver suddenly started belittling me, laughing. Sophia's cooking is just awful. And her cleaning is so sloppy, can't she do something about it? The living room fell silent, but Oliver didn't notice. In fact, he began to mock me even more.
The laundry is also carelessly done, she hardly works at all for a housewife.
I could feel Emma getting irritated beside me. Isabella, my mother-in-law, smiled, but her eyes weren't laughing. I had to say something. I might be a bit absent-minded at times, so maybe Oliver finds me lacking in some ways. But there's a way to say things. Emma glared at Oliver as she spoke. Oliver glared back, and the living room atmosphere turned tense. Then Lucas, as my father-in-law, began to speak calmly. A husband should help with his wife's shortcomings. Besides, Sophia always helps us out a lot. Oliver, discontented, kept quiet at Lucas's words. Emma was still angry, but Isabella calmed her down. The mood was ruined because of Oliver's words. I tried to lighten the mood, clapping my hands and smiling. "Hey! I made a cake, would you like to have some? Sophia's cakes are delicious. I'm so happy, let's eat." Emma's mood brightened instantly, and I felt relieved. Then Isabella, Emma, and I moved to the kitchen. "Sorry about Oliver earlier. We know how hard you always work, Sophia. Don't push yourself too much." "Isabella, thank you." Isabella's kind words almost brought me to tears. Returning to the living room, Oliver sat turned away, looking more upset than before. "I brought the cake." "I don't want it." "But it's your favorite pumpkin cake." "I said I don't want it." As Oliver yelled, the plate with the cake disappeared from my hands. Looking down, the smashed cake was stuck to the floor. "Oliver! Apologize to Sophia! It's her fault for forcing it on me." Oliver, though looking confused, refused to apologize to me. I was a little saddened. He used to apologize immediately in the past. That's awful. "Sophia, you should divorce him." "What? Don't be ridiculous. It's not your decision to make." Emma and Oliver started bickering, ignoring me, and their argument heated up. "Unlovable women can't get married. When I get married is none of your business." I desperately tried to calm down the shouting Emma. Oliver, looking at us in disdain, laughed and left, saying he was going out for a drink. "Oliver's been going out a lot lately." "Yeah, he never tells me where he's going." "Don't worry too much, I'll ask around too." I thanked the ever-kind Isabella. My in-laws always doted on me, treating me like their own daughter. They scolded me when I was wrong, feeling like a second set of parents. Part of the reason I married Oliver was because of my relationship with my in-laws. The thought of becoming a family with my beloved in-laws and Emma made me happy. But it was true that I still loved Oliver. However, since then, Oliver's treatment of me became increasingly harsh. "I'm going out." "Again? Where have you been going every weekend recently?" "Anywhere I want." After a while, Oliver started going out somewhere every weekend. Sometimes even staying overnight, but he stubbornly refused to tell me where. Moreover, he was always angry, and our usual conversations diminished. I once asked if I had done something wrong. But I never got a satisfying answer. Amidst this, as Christmas approached, I fell ill. Isabella came to help at our house. It took about a week to fully recover, and I had to start preparing for Christmas slowly, dragging my heavy body around, since Oliver wouldn't help. I was sick in bed, which caused a huge delay in preparing for Christmas. While I was busily working, Oliver had gone out somewhere. Entering Oliver's room, I noticed a bag sticking out of a drawer. I picked it up. Inside the bag was an SD card. Seeing it with a message card that read "For Oliver," I had a bad feeling. Just as Oliver returned home, I waited for him to take a shower and sneaked back into his room to check the contents on the computer. "What is this?" I was speechless at the footage. At the same time, anger surged through me. I'm going to divorce him. Determined, I gathered our relatives at our in-laws' house the next day. "Now, please look at this." As my voice directed the relatives and Oliver towards the TV, I pressed the play button. The scene that appeared left our relatives speechless, and Oliver turned pale. Why? As Oliver looked at me in disbelief, I smiled and handed him the divorce papers. I will never forgive him, I'll make him regret this. Seeing the divorce papers, Oliver's face turned even bluer.
Wait, hold on. Divorce is too sudden.
What are you talking about?
After seeing that video, there's no other option but divorce.
Oliver felt silent at my words. The content of the SD card was a childbirth scene. Of course, it wasn't mine. A young woman was struggling through labor. At first, I wondered why such a thing existed, but then I recognized the man beside the woman. It was unmistakably Oliver, stroking the woman's head and encouraging her.
Keep going!
I couldn't mistake Oliver's voice, having known him since childhood.
This is... I was just standing in, it's not what you think. Don't lie to me.
I turned up the volume on the TV. Then a conversation between the woman and Oliver filled the living room.
Evelyn! It's almost time! Our child is about to be born. Oliver, yes, I'll keep going.
After their conversation, a baby's cry could be heard. Then Oliver kissed the woman named Evelyn, thanking her repeatedly.
You did great. You worked so hard.
I did it for you, my love. I love you too. Oh, Evelyn. I can't wait to live with you and our child. Me either. After saying that and kissing again, the video stopped. The relatives in the living room were stunned, and my in-laws and Emma were visibly trembling with anger.
Well, after watching this, no one would believe he was just standing in as a proxy. I just got carried away. It was just an act of a father.
Lucas is usually a calm person, suddenly stepped forward and slapped Oliver. Oliver held his cheek in shock. Lucas was a gentleman who only got angry when necessary, and had never resorted to physical action. Everyone was surprised by this.
Do you understand what you're saying? Don't you feel sorry for Sophia? But this is...
Even then, Oliver tried desperately to explain himself. Emma spoke up in a calm voice.
I've always disliked you, but I thought I could maintain our relationship if you cherished my best friend. But someone who hurts my important friend can't be considered family. I'm cutting ties with you.
At Emma's words, Oliver's face turned red with anger.
You, a younger sister, are so presumptuous. If you want to cut ties, go ahead. It's a relief.
Then I'll cut ties too. Oliver froze at Isabella's words, said with a smile. He tries to hide it, but Oliver is quite the mama's boy. I like Isabella too, so it never really bothered me, but to be honest, I didn't really like how he clung to her, even nearing 40. Oliver seemed bewildered by Isabella's declaration of cutting ties.
But I'm the eldest son, right? Mom, you're joking about cutting ties, right?
Do you think I'm someone who would joke in this situation?
No.
Isabella never lost her smile. That made it even scarier, and the whispering relatives straightened up and began listening quietly to her. Isabella continued in a calm and steady voice. Don't worry about us. After all, we have Sophia. If she remarries someone wonderful and has children, they will be our grandchildren.
What? If she divorces, she's a stranger, right?
Not just Isabella, but Lucas, Emma, and I all sighed heavily at Oliver's response. In fact, after marrying, I had been legally adopted by my in-laws. It wasn't necessary, but my own relatives, eyeing my parents' inheritance, often pressured me into an adoption agreement. Your parents' inheritance is yours to use as you wish. But to protect you from those relatives, why don't you consider being legally adopted by us? After my parents passed away, my in-laws never asked me for money. I had prepared tuition and living expenses from my inheritance and gave the living expenses to my in-laws. However, they didn't touch it, saying it was important money, and when I got a job, they even added a celebration gift and returned it to me. I initially refused, but they insisted, so I gratefully accepted. Because of this history, I trusted Isabella's words. That's why I consulted with Oliver and got legally adopted right after our marriage. It seemed Oliver had completely forgotten about it.
No, but even if I was adopted, I'm the eldest son, the real child. That's right. I have a child. This house is mine.
Oliver, as if he had remembered something important, was met with laughter from Isabella. What are you talking about? As of today, you are no longer my child. Well, legally you'll still be my child, but we'll have to renounce your inheritance. Oliver was speechless at the decisive words. Tears streamed down his face from the rejection of his beloved Isabella. I added to Oliver's misery. By the way, do you know why I called everyone here today?
Eh?
Oliver looked at me, puzzled. His tear-stained face was dirty. I felt a bit pathetic for having loved such a pitiful man. Christmas was always celebrated at my in-laws' house. They were landowners in the area, with many relatives nearby. There was no other place that could accommodate our large family of nearly 50 people. But this time, we limited the number of people, having only families with children come from the relative side. So, there were only about 20 people in the living room, half of the usual number. It seemed Oliver hadn't even noticed that. After I pointed it out, he finally realized.
There are no children? But I hear crying. Are they in another room?
Oh, actually, we have a guest today. Please, come in. At my words, Emma stood up and opened the door at the back. There stood Evelyn, confidently with a baby in her arms. Evelyn stood there, holding the baby. Her demeanor saying she belonged and was welcomed.
Nice to meet you, Isabella. I'm Evelyn. This is Liam, our son, the fruit of my love with Oliver.
Evelyn said this cheerfully, but Isabella frowned. Though behind a door, she must have heard the conversation. But then I noticed the earphones in Evelyn's hands.
Were you listening to music in the next room?
Yeah, I was bored. Evelyn's attitude towards Isabella was starkly indifferent. She acted as if she was the rightful wife, and I was irritated, but realized she would soon be.
Do you know why you were invited today? Eh? Isn't it because you're getting a divorce? And then I'll be Oliver's wife. We have Liam too, so it's a celebration, right?
Her naive thinking made me sigh. In this atmosphere, thinking it's a celebration is just unbelievable. Oliver was frozen by the suddenness of it all, but seeing Evelyn's cluelessness seemed to bring him back to reality. Evelyn, we're in the middle of a difficult conversation. I'll contact you later, just wait a little longer.
Eh? I can't wait anymore. Write the divorce papers now.
Evelyn said this, handing a pen to Oliver. Then she looked at me, smirking in a mocking way. Sophia, was it? Thank you for your service until today. From now on, I will be the one receiving Oliver's love. Even with her triumphant tone, I just found it outright creepy. Since I saw that video of the childbirth scene, my love for Oliver is completely lost. I don't need his love, even if he begged me to take it. But to Evelyn, it seemed like I was regretful. Sorry about that. Oliver says I have firmer skin and am prettier to hold than you. He said you're like a skinny chicken. Evelyn laughed dismissively, with Oliver awkwardly trying to stop her. The onlookers' eyes were cold towards the two of them. I decided to respond with a smile and addressed Evelyn's comment.
No, thank you for keeping him company. I don't need him anymore, so please take him.
Evelyn's eyebrows twitched slightly at my words. She seemed about to say something, but I ignored her and continued. Well, you're getting a man who's about to be disowned, lose his house and job, and become poor.
Eh?
Evelyn's face clouded over. She probably thought that after Oliver and I divorced, she would stay in this house. While thinking how she would have known otherwise if she had listened earlier, I continued to smile at Evelyn.
Oliver, wait. Sophia's the one leaving, right? This is Oliver's house, right? I'm becoming your wife, right? You said I could be the housewife.
Evelyn confronted Oliver. Oliver looked uncomfortable and avoided her gaze.
Oliver, look at me. What are we going to do? I quit my job, remember? You said Liam could stay with Isabella and we'd live in luxury.
Evelyn started to freak out, scratching her hair. Startled by her shouting, Liam also began to cry, his cries echoing in the living room. I reluctantly took Liam from Evelyn and held him. He must be about 4 months old, just starting to hold his head up, and he was very cute. When I gently rocked him, he calmed down and fell asleep again. Relieved, I noticed Evelyn glaring at me.
Give him back! That's my and Oliver's child. The grandchild of this house.
He just fell asleep, so please don't raise your voice. While I was speaking, Evelyn snatched Liam back from me and returned him to the baby carrier. Liam woke up for a moment, but fell asleep again as Evelyn rocked him. I looked at her, relieved. Evelyn was glaring at me as if I were her sworn enemy.
You think you can just take Liam away? You're useless. A woman who can't get pregnant should leave this house.
At Evelyn's words, I realized Oliver hadn't told her about that incident. It was about why I quit my job as a preschool teacher.
Evelyn, didn't Oliver tell you why we didn't have children?
I don't know.
Isn't it because you're not loved?
Evelyn said this, looking triumphant. As if she was superior as a woman. But that didn't matter to me. Oliver was pale-faced in the background, but I continued, revealing the truth.
Oliver, I've always been unable to have children.
Evelyn's momentum stopped abruptly, as if it were a lie. The surrounding relatives were also stunned. Actually, I quit my job after having a miscarriage. I wanted children so badly, I went for a checkup for the first time when I tried to conceive. Oliver also had tests done with me. The results showed no issues with me, but Oliver had a condition making it difficult for him to have children. It wasn't impossible, but a natural conception was highly unlikely. The pregnancy we had was a miracle, but it ended due to genetic issues. I was sad, but wanted to try again. Oliver felt the same, so we started fertility treatments. Fortunately, there was still plenty of inheritance left, so I quit my job on Oliver's suggestion, to focus on my health. However, we saw no success with the treatments, and when we started considering adoption, Oliver became reluctant. Looking back, he probably started his affair during our treatments, and Evelyn's pregnancy came to light around the time we talked about adoption. Evelyn turned pale upon hearing this and looked at Oliver.
So, Evelyn, is Liam really Oliver's child? It's not impossible, right? Our love.
Her talking about love at this point was just absurd. I smiled and said again. That's why I said, natural conception is almost impossible.
But.
Evelyn was flustered, trying to make excuses. Emma cut her off.
Stop lying. You're my friend's wife, right? What?
Oliver looked at Emma, wide-eyed. Emma nodded at me and showed Evelyn her mobile phone screen. It showed Evelyn and Liam, a man, and a 4-year-old girl I didn't know. I had contacted Emma after watching the video the day before. Emma recognized Evelyn from the photo on SNS, belonging to a man she knew.
I knew it was Evelyn by her name and face. We work at the same place and talk often. You're married?
Oliver asked, but Evelyn didn't answer. Her expression confirmed Emma's words were true.
It was a shotgun wedding, right? No talk of divorce, and this photo says Liam is that man's child. No.
True love, huh?
Pretending your husband's child is another man's, to switch to a richer man. Is it the money you love?
Emma looked down on Evelyn with disdain. Evelyn, red-faced and shaking, didn't know how to respond and just looked down.
By the way, I've called that man, he'll be here soon. No! It was just a moment of weakness. Please don't tell my husband.
It's too late for that. At Emma's words, the doorbell rang, and Evelyn collapsed in despair. A relative opened the door, and Evelyn's husband, Henry, came in. He saw Evelyn and immediately shouted in anger.
You've been cheating on me? What were you thinking? It's not like that. It's a misunderstanding. I heard everything on the phone.
Realizing there was no escape, Evelyn froze in tears. Henry took Liam from her and stood up. Then apologized to us.
My wife has caused you a lot of trouble.
We will divorce.
Wait, I don't want a divorce.
Henry looked down on Evelyn coldly.
You promised to stop after the affair 3 years ago. And you continued. I'll raise the child. You won't see him again.
We were shocked by Henry's words. I couldn't believe that even though he had noticed it once, he continued to do it behind the scenes. Such audacity to claim a momentary lapse.
3 years ago, huh? No, Sophia, it's not like that.
What's different?
Going around marking your territory elsewhere?
At my words, Oliver just trembled, barely moving his mouth. I'm not usually one to get angry. But Emma once told me it's scary when I do. I'd hardly ever been angry with Oliver, so he seemed surprised by my attitude. I'm disappointed in you.
I can't believe you've been betraying your family for so long. I tried to get you and Emma to reconcile, but it looks like I was the one who couldn't see clearly.
Emma nodded as if to say, finally you understand. Oliver was stunned by my straightforwardness.
I'll be asking for compensation. And of course, child support.
Eh? I touched my stomach. I had been keeping it a secret, except from Emma, planning to announce it at Christmas. I was pregnant. The reason I'd been feeling unwell recently was morning sickness. After entering the stable period, I planned to surprise my parents and Oliver. The artificial insemination worked. It's truly your child. I kept quiet because I didn't want to get your hopes up and then disappoint you.
So.
Oliver collapsed, overwhelmed by my words. Evelyn, too, seemed drained of all energy to argue after hearing about my pregnancy and her own impending divorce. Then, please fill out the divorce papers. I said this and handed Oliver a pen. Then I left the house first with Emma. By now, Oliver must be getting glared at by the in-laws while filling out the divorce papers. Feeling refreshed after saying everything I wanted, I enjoyed a leisurely tea party with Emma. Later, Oliver and I finalized our divorce. Since his job was with a family company, he was fired due to this incident and ended up penniless and out of the house. Evelyn got divorced too and initially demanded money from Oliver. But seeing his situation, she quickly disappeared. In the end, Oliver had been working in a rundown snack bar to pay for the alimony and child support, but rumors have it that he was caught by some bad customers and taken away. I know about this because Emma, laughing about the fleeting nature of true love, told me. It was information from Henry, Evelyn's ex-husband. Lately, he's been going out more with his children, and it seems that Oliver's story comes up in their conversations. Henry, in fact, was the one Emma had a crush on during her student days. Though he reciprocated her feelings, he married Evelyn when she got pregnant. Emma denies it, but her blushing suggests that maybe, just maybe, spring is near for her. After Oliver left, my in-laws were initially down, but they recovered while I was busy with pregnancy preparations. Now they dote on their grandchild, becoming loving grandparents. At first, they were hesitant, feeling guilty towards me, but eventually, they began treating me like their real daughter again. Living together since birth, Emma jokes about how it's hard to tell who is the real daughter now. As for me, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl without any trouble. She's a very cute girl. I hope she grows up to be bright and cheerful like Emma. My friend and now sister, who I admire. Sophia. She won't stop crying.
Okay, I'm coming.
I hear my daughter's cries and Emma's troubled voice from the living room. Smiling, I responded and left the balcony. Outside, the sky is clear and cloudless. A future full of promises awaits us. Just like this bright blue sky.